Readers, reviewers, countrymen, lend us your ears. And a huge thank you to all of our Patreons.
Thank you to the Pit Fighters, the First Swords, and all of the Bright Stars. Truth and courage.
Hello and welcome back to, for the very first time, to the Brothers Gwynne. I am Will and my brother Ed is not here, but I'm sure everyone's going to be missing him, so I'll have a picture of him pop up on screen somewhere at some point. But today I'm here just on my own and I'm going to be talking about all the books that I've given 5 stars in 2024. This has not been the most plentiful year of reading for me. I think in 2022 and 23 I'd read far more books by September than I have in this year, and a lot of that is down to university and all that work and all that jazz. But the quality has just been next level. Quite a few of the books that I'm going to be talking about today are just some of my favourites of all time. They are exceptional. They are standouts. Some of them are books that I'm shouting from the rooftops for everybody to hear. I think it's a good job actually I didn't do this video there, because it would probably be about an hour and a half long as we talked about all our favourite reads, and we do have a bit of a tendency to waffle, and that's a bit harder when there's just one of you. We don't go on as many tangents. But today, as I said, talking about my favourite reads of 2024, the ones that were those 5 stars. Of course, before I get into it, just to say 5 stars, of course, is subjective. The way I give 5 stars is there's a variety of ways. Ooh, that car was loud going past. Sorry if you heard that. There's a variety of ways for a book to earn 5 stars, in my opinion, for my own kind of ratings. So one is that I just adored the read. One is that it was very impactful and it is a book I'll be thinking about for a long time. And the others are kind of a mix of that. It can be for great characters, an engaging story, a world that made me think, quite a few reasons, but the common factor is that I love being immersed in this journey, and that when I close the final page, I miss it. And then I'm still thinking about it months on. And so there may be some books that I gave 5 stars at the time, but they've kind of diminished since then, because, as I said, that last factor for the 5 star, the X factor of these books, is that they remain riveted in my mind months on from when I closed the final page. And so that's enough talking. Let's get into it and talk about all my 5-star reads of 2024 so far in order. So first up, I have Egil Saga by an unknown writer. This is, or was, on my uni reading list. And this is a saga, as it's called, Egil Saga. You may have picked that up. And there is sadly this myth that is propagated that the Old English and Old Norse texts are very difficult to read and you shouldn't read them unless you're studying them. And that is just so wrong. I thought that as well. But then since I've read quite a few of the sagas and Beowulf, etc., I've realised how accessible and how enjoyable these texts are. They are so different to anything we would read now, as we'd expect, as they were written centuries ago, that they are just still accessible though, and that makes them just so unique and so immersive, and I love that they offer a very different lens of story. Egil Saga is a family saga, the family of Egil, where he's the main character, but it starts with his father and grandfather. And it is this family enmity with the kings of, I believe, Norway, or it might be Denmark. It's been quite a while, actually, since I read these books, so I'll have pop up on screen what is correct. But there's this enmity with this monarchy, this family of kings. And it is a lot about kind of individualism. It's kind of highlighting the promise of Iceland, which didn't have a leadership, really. And it is about, as I said, that individualism, acting on your own. And because of that, Egil Saga isn't your usual type of story where your hero amasses an army, faces the evil king and defeats them. It's very different. It's an individual story where Egil goes from place to place to place, acting his own, giving us very clever stories that are entertaining and humorous along the way, but it won't have those usual beats. And that's what I found in this case really great about Egil Saga. It made it very different, so don't go in expecting your normal kind of beats in a modern fantasy book. It's very different, but that is what I thought was the strength of Egil Saga. And it's fantastical as well. It brings in a lot of the beliefs of the time, and magic makes an appearance, and so do prophecies and magic weapons and so on. So it's great for a fantasy reader to dive into. I promise I won't be talking about every text for that long, but I just feel quite passionate about trying to push people to read more sagas and Beowulf. But next up, I'm talking about 2 together historical fiction, I've got The House of the Golden Door and The Temple of Fortuna. Books 2 and 3 of the Wolf Den trilogy by Elodie Harper. This is just riveting, moving, incredibly well-written historical fiction. We are thrust into the 1st century AD, into Pompeii, in the presence of Amara, who is a slave in Pompeii. The House of the Golden Door and the Temple of Fortuna, the first word I think of with these books is tension. I don't know if a series is this tense. I don't think I've ever experienced anything like it before, and I don't know if I will again. Amara is a brilliant central character who you've got her political machinations and her pursuit of survival, but in a way where you are rooting for her to survive. She has to be very clever, she has to deceive people, but you understand her motivations and desires, and the tension when she nearly lets slip or the things that are out of her control is just... Elodie Harper is a writer to be studied if you're looking for that kind of character relations of a power imbalance with the tension along the way. I love how this is very heartfelt and heartwarming, but heartbreaking at the same time. There's love and loss, despair, moments that make you want to pump your fist in the air, and others that make you want to weep. It has a full roller coaster of emotions, and plus, now I've finished the series, I can say it ends so brilliantly and so satisfyingly, which is always a worry for the end of a series that's so great, but I can promise that from page 1 of the Wolf Den to the very end of the Temple of Fortuna, I loved it, and I'd recommend this to everyone. And so that is the Wolf Den trilogy that is going to be one of my favourite series of all time, and I miss it so much, but I cannot wait for Elodie Harper's next project to come out in 2025. Next up, I've got The Fury of the Gods by Papa Gwynne, the Holy Grail, as I call it right now. Before Fury of the Gods is released, this is the only copy I have. It is a galley. Papa Gwynne very kindly gave me one. And Fury of the Gods, oh my word, it blew me away. And I'm not just saying that because I'm Papa Gwynne's son. I promise I mean that from the bottom of my heart. This conclusion is just beyond epic. It is incredible. I love that it keeps the intimate heart of our characters. Of course, I can't name them because spoilers, it's a book 3. It is the conclusion of the Bloodsworn saga, and it is executed just perfectly. When I read this, very lucky to have early access to The Fury of the Gods, I had no idea what direction it was going to go to. Of course, you know Papa Gwynne, there's going to be an epic conflict in the final book of a series. But I did not realise how epic, and I did not realise how well Papa Gwynne could keep it so intimate as well. And it is just... chef's kiss. It is just perfect, and I cannot wait for The Fury of the Gods to be out in the world for everyone to read. Of course, we've probably yapped on about it so much that people are bored of hearing of it on the Brothers Gwynne right now. But there is a read-along of the Bloodsworn saga going on right now, September to November, and this will be the read for November. But we might be starting a week early for the release of Fury. But yeah, there is Fury of the Gods, and I'm so proud of Papa Gwynne. Once again, his 10th published book, and once again, it is just insane. And so that's Fury of the Gods. And next up, I have some self-published fiction. This is Return to Edan by Dr. Fantasy himself, Philip Chase. This is another conclusion to a series. And book 2, The Prophet of Edan, was brilliant. But it almost felt like the end of a traditional fantasy series. It wrapped up a lot. It got rid of some of our main villains, and it had many of those, without spoilers, beats that you expect in a final book. And so going into this, I'd learned to trust Philip by this point, but I went and just flabbergasted what was going to happen, really. I know some of the characters that are going to be in it, but beyond that, basically nothing. But I loved that in Return to Edan. It is such unique fantasy for that reason. Usually when you get to the final installment of a series, you kind of know what's going to happen. And that's not a bad thing. That's usually a good thing. It means you're invested. You've thought about what you want to happen. And then it's amazing when that is realised. Return to Edan is very different. You really don't know what's going to happen, but you're carried along the journey. You're invested and engaged. And I love that Philip, he has the boldness to add new POVs and new central characters in Return to Edan, which they just come out of the page so well. So not only do you have the characters from the previous books, you have new ones that you love to follow. And that is a bold move for a final book in a fantasy series. I feel so much love for this trilogy. It takes the best, in my opinion, of traditional fantasy and modern fantasy. And it's just a really satisfying, fitting ending, which doesn't surprise me when it's written by Philip Chase. So please do check this out. Another series that I've concluded in 2024. But now to spin that on its head, a series I started in 2024. That is Play of Shadows with Sebastien de Castell. Sorry, written by Sebastien de Castell. This was released in, I believe, April or May, only a few months ago. And I was hooked from the beginning. Our main character is called Damalas Shadowmantane, one of the best names in fiction I have come across. And that kind of swashbuckling, humorous style to the name is exactly what this book delivers. I don't know how Sebastien found a name that so accurately portrays what his writing style is and what his tone and atmosphere is about. This is a book that is full of humour and wit and sharpness and twists and turns and shocks, but also with those, we also need some heartwarming moments. We need characters we're invested in. We need a story that moves us. And Sebastien gives the whole lot. This is one of the funniest books I have read. I love how Damalas tries to escape being hunted down by joining a theatre troupe which is protected. But as he tries to fade into the shadows, being in this theatre troupe of some very pretentious people and others just promising the power of art, he is thrown into the centre of the politics of the duchy and of the city. And I love how just these characters are dragged into events they really don't want to be in, but they're forced to throw their hand in. And I love how that unfolds in Play of Shadows. As I said, it's a really witty book, and the next one isn't out, but this isn't too confusing, so I think you don't need to worry about reading book 1 without book 2 being released yet. It is Sebastien de Castell at his very best. If you haven't read The Greatcoats, please pick up Play of Shadows, or even better, The Greatcoats and Play of Shadows and all of his other books as well. Next up, I have another book that was released in 2024, and it is one of my favourites of the year and all time. It is Arthur, the third book of the Arthurian Tales trilogy by Giles Kristian. I have a review up on my own separate channel if you would like to see my more in-depth thoughts on this. But a short, condensed version is that Arthur is a companion tale, so even though it is the third in the series following Lancelot and Camelot, you might not be able to see, but they're on my shelves over there. It is the third in that series, but it's a companion tale, meaning that it's a very different cast. It has its own self-contained story, and I do recommend reading the others first, but you could read this on its own. It's quite a short book. It is very intimate, quite small scale, even though there's an epic scope. You've got an old man named Beren, and he's kind of lost his love for the world in many ways. They're not rose-tinted for sure. Life has lost a lot of its colour. He feels the aches and pains of old age, both physical and mental. But then, as he's working for this mercenary group, he attacks a group, as he's charged to, and then he sees a boy who he knows indirectly. He knows his name and he knows what he represents. And he can't kill this boy. He just can't bring himself to do it. And he can't let the others who he's around do it either. And so he defends this boy and makes a lot of enemies in the process. So he runs away and he tries to take this child to safety, but he is being followed. But a huge weight rests on this, because this is no ordinary boy. This is probably the last boy who could unite Britain. And then we've got another timeline of Arthur as a child, and I love how this really shines a light on the man who will become so well known in myth and legend, and it forges a lot of kind of his weaknesses but his strengths as well, and it adds so much kind of context, and I found that really unique for the Arthurian legend. You don't really see him as a child. You already see him when he's this powerful, charismatic, intimidating leader who can defeat his foes with ease and stands up for chivalry. But you see the child before that. And this is a gritty historical fiction book, and it's just so good. There are so many heartwarming moments and heartbreaking ones. There is true, real, realised, believable character growth that is natural and organic. There are great action sequences. There's a riveting plot. There is a great standout cast of characters and just a wonderful lyrical writing prose to carry us through it all. It is brilliant. As I said, check out my review if you want to see it in more detail. But I feel so passionate about this read. It's wonderful. And my brother Ed loved it as well, as did Papa Gwynne. And now on to another 2024 release. This is You Like It Darker by Stephen King, a short story collection. This might be the only short story collection I've given 5 stars. I've not quite finished Different Seasons, also by Stephen King, because I haven't read The Body. So it would probably be 5 stars with that, but I think this is the only short story collection I'll give him 5 stars. I just thought it was so good. I think there's 11 short stories in here. I loved 9. I was indifferent about 1, and I didn't like another. But luckily, the one I was indifferent about and the one I didn't like were 2 of the shortest stories in this collection. But there are so many that stand out, and I love the mix of the supernatural but also just the human in our own normal world. Stephen King just shows off really with ease how he can create standout characters in moments. He can make them unique and give them their own specialist characteristics that make them stand out just within seconds. And he does it without kind of force feeding all this information to you. It comes effortlessly. It comes naturally out of the page. And the different tones and atmospheres that he strikes in the different stories just proves why he is known as a master storyteller. And yeah, You Like It Dark is another one to add to the list for Stephen King lovers and those who don't love Stephen King alike, because this is just a great example of his skill as an author. And now going from the father to the son, which I didn't mean to, but that's how it's happening because this is in order of the 5 stars. And so the 5-star I had after reading You Like It Darker was Horns by Joe Hill, Stephen King's son. This is a standalone horror, murder mystery and dark comedy all rolled into one ball of greatness. This is about someone who their girlfriend was murdered. He was the main suspect, but no one was convicted, and so everyone around him really believes it was him. And so in the years since his girlfriend's death, he's kind of fallen into a pit of depression, and on the anniversary of the murder, he goes out and he binge drinks. And he doesn't remember what happens, but he gets up in the morning with a headache. He goes to the mirror, looks up, and he sees horns off his head. So, of course, he freaks out a bit, as you would. He calls his doctor, says that he's hallucinating, and he goes there. But on the way, he bumps into some people, and they start revealing their deepest, darkest desires. And he realises that it may not be a coincidence. This is happening just as he's grown the horns. He soon realises he's got this unique power, and he decides to use it to find out who killed his girlfriend. It's a riveting story. I love the dual timelines that are explored, and it is just one of the best reads of 2024. It caught me off guard. I didn't realise how much I was going to love this. A very different book that I usually read, but I love it when it's kind of the normal world with a smallish supernatural element. I love that when it really influences the story. I'm not so much a fan of kind of modern day epic fantasy where like it's world-shaking, world-saving business. I like it when it's a more intimate story, and that's what Horns gives us. As I said, with a murder mystery, with the dark comedy, and with a little tinge of horror as well. It is wonderful, and I'll be reading more by Joe Hill in the future. And then my next 5 stars was Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. This is a 2024 release. It's historical fiction, and it recently won the Waterstones Debut Award. Sorry, I just lost my voice there, but carrying on, Glorious Exploits, it has changed me. It is quite a small read, not many pages. It is about Athenians tried to invade Syracuse in 412 BC. They failed, they've been captured, and to kind of show their superiority, the Syracusans have thrown the Athenians into a quarry as prisoners, and they are slowly starving and dehydrating and dying. Pretty horrific. That's the premise. And then we've got 2 potters as our main characters. They've recently lost their jobs, and they start to go down to the quarry, to the Athenian prisoners, to get them to speak lines of plays to them. And they eventually decide to be directors themselves and stage an entire play using the Athenian prisoners as their cast, which of course is going to upset a lot of the Syracusans who feel a bitter, burning, raging hatred for the Athenians. But they decide to do it anyway. And this is a book that is full of paradoxes. Directing this play gives these characters this liberty, this feeling of freedom, that they can change lives, that there's something more to the world, whilst at the same time, simultaneously, reminding them that they are never going to escape Syracuse and that they will never achieve the range of emotion and live their life as much as the characters in these plays. I love the paradox of kind of the human condition that's explored in Glorious Exploits, with masterful characters that you don't necessarily love, but you're still rooting for because of how human they are. They have grave flaws, but you understand them and you love following them. And the relationships these characters form, I don't know how Ferdia Lennon makes these characters feel so vivid in such a short page time. It is truly extraordinary. And as a debut as well, is just out of this world. And there is a review of Glorious Exploits on the channel with my brother Ed. So I won't waste any more time talking about that. If you'd like to hear more about Glorious Exploits, go watch that video. Or please just pick it up now. Do yourself a favour and read Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. Another 2024 release, actually. And then next up, I've got The Sword of Kaiden, another book that is reviewed on the Brothers Gwynne. This is possibly my book of the year so far. It blew me away. I love how this is very different fantasy, and I think it can achieve that because it is self-published. If this was traditionally published, I think the beats would have been changed, because in The Sword of Kaiden, the falling action is much longer than it usually would be. And I think maybe if you don't know that going in, it might be a bit jarring, but Ed had told me about that, so I was prepared. And I loved it. I loved that it allowed for proper character development. And whilst a lot of this book is about the build-up to the climax, it also dedicates proper time to the aftermath, which in probably 80% of fantasy books, I would say, is the weakness. After the big epic climatic conclusion that often is kind of world-saving or world-ending, the aftermath feels pretty rushed. So it felt very fresh and unique that it was different here, that it was given the proper attention to detail. And with the incredible cast of characters, whether you hate them, you love them, or you just love to see them on the page, it is just another level of characterization in The Sword of Kaiden. It is rare to come across a book where not only do the main characters live in your memory, but all the side characters do as well. They are properly, fully fleshed out. And it is a journey that really changes you. So many people say that this is one of their favourite reads of all time, and for good reason. I cannot believe it's taken me this long to pick it up, but I've rectified that mistake now. I love it, and I will be reading Bright over Bloodhaven at some point soon. But yeah, that's The Sword of Kaiden, possibly my favourite book of 2024 so far. And then I think the last book I'm talking about today is The Land of the Living and the Dead by Shauna Lawless. As I record this, this is not yet published, but it will be when the video comes out. Wow, this is an extraordinary conclusion to the Ghoul Song trilogy. The Land of the Living and the Dead just stands head and shoulders above the previous installments, even though I really loved those as well. It raises the stakes to a whole new level. This is Irish mythology mixed with Irish history. In the third installment, we're in very early 11th century Ireland. And so we're kind of reaching a conflict in Ireland, which will kind of change the balance of power. There is an element of peace that has been struck, but you can just tell that is going to change. And so with kind of this Irish history hanging in the balance, we've also got the mythology as well. The conflict between the, I'm going to butcher these pronunciations and I'm very sorry, the Fomorians and the Tuatha De Danann. You've got these two rival mythological groups about to come to a conflict, come to a head and come to a battle with each other as well. And I love how you've got these two different conflicts kind of sprawling across this series, and I love how they come to a head. In some ways I expected, which was very satisfying, and other ways which completely caught me off guard and shocked me, but in a good way. But as always, Shauna Lawless keeps the characters at the heart of the story. So whilst you've got this epic background of magic and also the fate of an island in the balance, you also have the character stories at the heart, and I was so moved. And wow, I did not know Shauna Lawless could be this horrible to her characters. That ending, I am not okay. And that's all I can say, really. But The Land of the Living and the Dead, please pick up the Ghoul Song trilogy. Historical fantasy at its finest. And there we go. That is all the books I have given 5 stars in 2024 so far. I'm not sure how many there are. I'm guessing maybe 12 along those lines. And these are the creme de la creme, in my opinion, of the books I've picked up in 2024. There's been many others I've thoroughly enjoyed, many others that I've loved the journey with them. But these are just kind of elevated to that next level, in my opinion. And I really hope that you pick some of these up. Let me know if you've read some of them already. Let me know if some of them have intrigued you. And let me know if there's any books that you think I would enjoy because of I enjoyed these. I'd love to hear any of those in the comments below. But everyone, thank you so much for watching. And hopefully you carry on watching The Brothers Gwynne. And next video, I'll be back with my brother Ed. And we'll be back to being The Brothers Gwynne together, as we should be. But for now, thank you so much for watching a video of just me Truth and Courage, the Brothers Gwynne.